Welcome to What in the World, a project initiated by Hungry for Life International. Today's podcast is titled Mary's Story Part 2, The Effects of Communism in Ukraine Today. So grab your headphones, sit back, relax, and listen as we get a first-hand account of how communism left Ukraine and the struggles that the people face today, from a personal perspective of Mary Martz.
Okay, welcome back to part 2 of Mary's podcast.
Hello.
Different day. We are wearing the same outfits, but this is part 2 of Mary's story of growing up under communism. So if you didn't catch part 1, pause this and go back, get some context for what it was like to grow up communist. Mary provided a really detailed picture and totally worth a listen. So head back to the page and listen to that before you listen to this. But Mary, welcome back.
Thank you.
To recap a bit and also provide some context for our discussion, can you briefly tell us what Ukraine was like under communism and how it left the country today?
How Ukraine was under the communism. The biggest thing was everything was collective. Everything belonged to everybody and nobody at the same time.
Right.
All the farmings, all the lands, all the stores, everything. There was nothing private owned by private person. There was no store, no farm, absolutely zero, nothing. So when you have government owning everything, it's evident that you were going to end up where we ended up.
Which was in poverty.
Yeah.
How did distribution work? If the government owned everything, how did they distribute food? How did they distribute equipment or your basic needs? Or was it not quite like that?
It wasn't quite like that. It's just that prior to communism, if you had something, you had a mill or you had a store, you had a farm, it was taken away from you. And then it was just a big, huge farm built. So instead of somebody owning 10 cows or 20, everything was removed. And now all the people in that town that had stuff, the stuff was removed from them. And then there was one big farm, for example, built. And all the animals were in that farm. So the distribution, you got paid whatever the salary it was, and then you were buying stuff. When you worked for collective farming, that was a little bit different because there was certain allowance of milk that you could take home. People stole a lot. It was a huge thing to steal back then, some felt that they just took their own. They didn't think that was stealing. They just took what was taken away from their grandparents or parents or them.
Right.
So
in their mind, it was still theirs.
Still theirs. Yeah. The same with the land. All the land was taken away from people that had acreages and stuff. And farms, huge farms. The land was taken away, and then everybody just worked collectively on that piece of farm. And the same thing, you were allowed to take, let's say, one head of cabbage or whatever the allowance was. I don't quite know. But, you took 2 or you took 4 or you took whatever. And then the higher in the ranking you were, the more you could take. And so that's kind of how it was. People in cities, they worked at the factories because Ukraine was a part of USSR. The borders were shut down. So everything had to be made in USSR. All the fridges, the cars, whatever, anything you name, nothing was made in China or Canada or anywhere else. Right. So there was activities happening, but yeah.
Tell us a bit about the news information that was being fed to everyone, because in the previous episode you talked about the Iron Curtain. That you didn't know what Disneyland was. You didn't know what the Beatles were, who the Beatles were, or anything like that. So what information were you fed? Was everybody fed?
You know what? It was a informational powerhouse USSR was, because we were not allowed or we were not able to see outside of USSR. All we knew is what was taught and what was in front of us. Like, we were the best country in the world. We had everything. We had the best hospitals. We had the best schools. We were the smartest people in the world. We were to hate Americans. I don't know why, but Americans were it was the literally Cold War. Like, Americans, they were always against. We were taught against. It was interesting. Our dad actually always taught us that we are all equal and everyone is equal, and he never had this teaching us or being against foreigners. There was never such thing. But I mean, we never saw a foreigner either. So, but we thought everything was the best that we had.
Do you remember like believing what you heard? You believed that USSR
yeah, you
was
just
the
don't
best,
question it
right,
because
you're
know,
young.
If you think you have the best car,
yeah,
and it takes 18 liters of fuel per kilometer almost, you just think that's the best vehicle.
The best.
The best, you know. You have a
so
car
efficient.
so efficient. I mean, we even have a joke about little kids are in the classroom and the teacher asks, oh, who has the best hospitals in the world? And Masha raises her hand, USSR. And somebody else, oh, who has the best playgrounds in the world? And somebody else raises a hand, who has the best toys? And another boy raises a hand, USSR. And one little Vanya sits in the back of a class, raises his hands sheepishly and says, and the teacher says, Vanya, what would you like? I would like to live in USSR.
So it's like total indoctrination.
Total.
Yeah.
And, you know, as a kid, you just don't question things. You just think, that is probably. And if you had a good life, I mean, a good life by being loved by your parents, being accepted, being loved by your siblings, your neighbors, you just don't really, how much more do you need? You know, you have a full stomach and you just don't think like you are lacking much.
Right. Yeah. That's so funny. So then what happened in 1992 when communism fell? How did that structure? How do you take, so everybody is taught one thing, you are all believing one thing, but then your whole world collapses and then what happens? I feel like total chaos would ensue.
It was an absolute total chaos. And especially for people who believed in the ideology of a communism. It was absolutely insane. Like we had so many people that actually literally physically got mental illnesses from having their world that they believe in and preached and were hoping for and trusted totally, completely crash without any warnings or anything. Literally, the walls came down like Jericho walls. And it was huge. It was just it was devastating.
How old were you when that happened?
I was pretty old. I was born in 75, so.
Sorry, I did not mean to give your age away, but
No,
I was just trying to paint
that's
a picture
okay.
if you understood what was happening at the time.
I was 16 when it happened. So, I mean, our world wasn't shaken as far as my family goes because we did not, we had a different belief. Our foundation of belief and our trust was different. So financially, yes, everybody was shaking, including us.
Why?
Because I just will draw you a picture of or I should say communist times. So the way the communism was working in Ukraine, or this big empire of USSR, for example, you had a factory that was making cars. So Ukraine would produce tires, Kazakhstan would make wheels, would make a steering wheel, Belarus, for example, will make a motor, and somebody else, like Russia, would make something else.
Okay.
So it wasn't like the plant was in one country. It was the plants that, in order to produce this vehicle, you had all these factories all over the USSR. So when the USSR collapsed, how do you produce a car?
Okay.
How do you make a fridge? How do you make a stove? Because that was their thinking, a way of thinking that you unite everybody. Everybody contributes to this one big country, one big family. But when that all collapses, you have no jobs. The same with collective farming. Now that the communists collapsed, the government is gone. Who is this farm belongs to? Nobody. So people just steal. They steal animals. They steal equipment. And it was just a chaos, a complete chaos, which created gangsters, thieves, gangsters. Then gangsters turned into mafia. And for years and years, we had this, continues in some ways. We have this gangsters and mafia running the
So they
world.
kind of took over as the governing body of Ukraine.
Yeah.
Because there was none suddenly.
Yeah,
So they found an opportunity and they took it.
So people were crushed emotionally, mentally, spiritually, whatever they believed in. It was hard. Also because the communists crashed, all the currency was the same throughout the whole entire USSR. So when collapse happened, all the savings that you had in bank accounts, which everybody had, it became nothing. It
totally
became worth zero.
Devalued.
We had no even currency. We would have these papers with the coupons, and we would cut it out and use 2 coupons for this food or 3 coupons for that. It was just absolute chaos, absolute hard, empty shelves, no really food as far as, going to the store and buying. And when you talk about apartments or fridges or whatever, that was like you would have to put your name on the waiting list for years. To get an apartment, you would wait 10, 15 years, or get a car. It was just
So what did your family do?
You know what? Dad never panicked. He never even told us that him and Mom lost all this money. It was later on that they shared with us when we were a little bit older. So then, because Dad was not afraid of working, he started doing constructions, and he would take us kids and he would build a private home for somebody who had a little bit more money or were higher up. And people that were high up in the government, a day before this whole collapse happened, literally, they just bought a ton of things, fridges, cars, whatever they could, because they had money.
Wow.
And they knew that was going to devaluate.
Wow.
So then they would resell it to somebody else, and or trade it and stuff like that. So that's how Dad would just work for those people. And and then we all worked and pitched in, and I got an opportunity to go to the States and work in the farm. So I went and worked at the farm to pay all the debts that Dad had to borrow in order for us to survive during those years when there was no work. And
so you went to where in the States?
I was in Iowa.
And you worked on a farm?
I worked on the farm feeding little calves.
Really?
Waking up at 4 a.m. I had 105 calves. And
I didn't know that.
yeah, so I earned some money. And then my other sister, before I had an opportunity, I think she was 2 years prior to the opportunity that I got, or 3 even, she had an opportunity to go and work in Germany in a restaurant, doing cleaning, and I think also helping this family, and she got paid. So she was able to earn her money to pay the debts that Dad had to actually go into a debt and borrow money from people that had some funds. And that's how we all pitched in and were able to survive. And God, again, provided what was needed, provided me an opportunity to go to the States, provided an opportunity for my sister to go to Germany, and provided all that we needed again and again.
That seems to be a reoccurring theme. In
Yes.
I was going to say the Martz family, but you're not.
Yeah.
You're not a Martz originally. What is your maiden name?
Bernik. Yeah. It's not quite. It doesn't sound very Ukrainian, but yeah.
1992 was not that long ago. Well,
it wasn't. Not that long ago, really.
Depends how old you are.
Yeah.
I remember 1992.
Yeah.
So I feel like the ramifications of the fall of communism would be pretty evident still today in the country. Can you paint a bit of a picture of what the country is like today because of all they went through back then?
So picture that my mom is 75, and all her savings, her, the prime one, almost like her prime years or whatever, when you start thinking about not retiring, but putting aside something because you are going to be older, and everything is gone. And then imagine her now at the age of 75, not having any savings. How do you survive having little tiny miserable pensions that, during winter season, she cannot even, her mom's pension doesn't cover her monthly bill in January. She uses her whole entire pension to pay the bills, the heat bills in January.
Wow.
So then think about food and medication, and I mean, as far as like buying some for yourself, that's not even on the list. And that's what the life of older people in Ukraine is. It's a very, very similar. All of them, all older people are struggling that worked and lived during USSR because they just have nothing.
Right.
Just this miserable pension. So it's, for them, that's hard. Then you take, during USSR, there was not so many orphanages because the system was so powerful. You couldn't just not work. You finished high school and you had to know what university or college you were going to. And before you finished your college, you were not the one choosing where you're going to work. It was the government was telling you were going to work in that hospital as a nurse, if you were a nurse or whatever. So there was a whole system. And when all of that collapsed, you had kids that you couldn't provide to. Mm-hmm. You had no jobs. You started drinking because you had nowhere to go. So a lot of men and women, after the collapse of USSR, became alcoholics, just trying to numb the pain, the fear, the unknowns, and that started creating orphans, a ton of orphans, kids that started to become abused, and so you have a country with orphans because of what communists left. So you have all these, the orphans and the elderly that are unprotected, that don't know how to make it. Mm-hmm. And the middle class, middle-aged people also struggling to provide for their kids, get a job, get stability. You have corruption still to this day.
That was my next question. What is the government doing right now to help the country?
They're doing a lot of reforms, and we're going through all these revolutions and stuff, but it seems like it's just hard to get people that are corrupted out of the system because it's kind of the communists breed the government that is only cares about themselves and enriches themselves from the rest of the people. Mm-hmm. Then their kids are usually the one, probably not in every case, but many of those will have their kids take over their positions, and it just carries on. And
so it's hard for communism to die, really. Like, even though communism doesn't exist anymore, the ideologies are still...
The corruption is still there. The corruption in the government is still there because everybody looks for themselves, or majority of them in the government. And they are the ones who have money. They are the ones that have businesses. They are the ones that now own these big stores and every factories because they had the means to start with. Mm-hmm. By working for the government or by becoming gangsters and mafia and stealing from whatever was left from the communist, like community stuff, and then stealing from those that had something, and they just keep doing it.
Are Christians still being... I know we don't like to use the word persecuted per se, but are they still being bullied?
You know what? Actually not. I would say Ukraine is one of the most freest country in the I don't know the world, but in Europe or even in comparison to North America, You can talk about God, you can preach about God in school, you can on the street, in the hospital, in prison, anywhere you want. You can share the gospel.
That's neat.
Mm-hmm.
There's Ukraine is split between the East and the West at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what's happening in the East and what's happening in the West?
So West borders with the Western countries, like EU, yeah, like you take Hungary, like the province I'm from, we border with Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, and then goes Austria, Germany. So we are like a gateway to the West.
Mm-hmm.
So you see a lot what the Western world has. You have an opportunity to travel. You have an opportunity to even work. So the mentality of the Western Ukrainians is a little bit different than a mentality of the Eastern people, because the Eastern Ukraine, all you have is Russia on your side, on the other side that you can visit. Really, there is really nothing else. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because the east of the country was always, for some reason, a little bit poorer than the West, and the communist collapse did way more damage in the eastern part of Ukraine than it did in the West. The depression, alcohol addictions, and all that. I mean, they're kind of across the whole country, but it seems like it's way heavier in the eastern part of Ukraine because people don't have as many opportunities as people in the West as far as the job is or traveling or any of that. So it is hard, and with the war going on in the East, it also makes it way harder, this destabilized economy and a lot of people fleeing. You know, I think have about 1.7 or probably over that now, people that were displaced. And life is harder on the East than is in the West.
Is it more, where are our projects, Hungry for Life's projects, where are they mostly situated?
Majority of our projects are in the eastern part of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Because the need, though I am from the
greater,
West myself, but I always I always felt like these guys have a little bit more, they are surviving, they're not surviving, they're actually living a little, which in the East, people are actually surviving. Mm-hmm. That's what we did our whole life. Ukrainians had to. And it continues to be more vivid in the East. So, so that's where we are mostly, in the East.
I want to backtrack a little bit. So now and we'll get to this as well. I'm kind of hopping all over the place.
That's okay.
For you growing up, and then the fall of communism, and then humanitarian aid coming into play, mm-hmm. You're on this side right now, mm-hmm. arranging for teams mm-hmm. and arranging projects and aid going over to Ukraine. What was it like being on the other side of that equation, being the one to receive humanitarian mm-hmm. aid? What kind of impact did that have on your life?
First of all, it was the first time we met foreigners. We just thought they were some sort of like from a different planet, species or something.
Why? Did they look funny?
They looked clean.
Okay.
They had they had white socks. We never had white socks growing up. It was like and they would have these very white socks, and the shirt, everything was just so, I don't know, they had a smile on. It was so different of what we were taught. Mm-hmm. They were these mean people, or these terrible, or whatever. We were the wealthiest, the whatever, but the clothes they had on them was just so clean and nice, and they were just very smiley, and they very welcoming, very, very warm. So it was, the first impression was so shocking, like, oh my word, they are just nice people. Mm-hmm. And then, even like this suitcase they would have a traveling suitcase. Like, we didn't have suitcases traveling. You just had a plastic bag or whatever. And we thought, well, they probably have more than us, or whatever, right? Or even the vehicles that they would come, some of them that came by vehicles. We never even seen some of the cars because we just saw Lada, and that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah.
So it was like you were like your world was just like, what? Like, oh, where we taught something that wasn't actually true.
The Iron Curtain starts
Yeah.
to lift.
That's right. So that was the first impression, was just like, oh my word, they're totally not we were taught.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would bring us gifts, and that was like, oh my word. And the gifts would be like, you know, like towels, or just things that were such a hard to get, like a nice towel, like even anything during USSR was such a hard to get by. Like it wasn't just the stuff was everywhere. So, and then they would get you like a little dress, and I remember the first garbage bag. We didn't have garbage bags back during Soviet time. And it was the black garbage bag. Now I know it was a garbage bag. We thought it was a special containers. It's a garbage bag. And it had a tape on whatever, that we didn't have stuff like that. It was just so weird, like observe this whole thing, and then you open, and I remember that my first sweater, I got the sweater out of it, and it was probably summer or spring, I don't remember, but what did we know? Like we didn't have these season outfits or anything, right? Everything was kind of brown and blue and gray, whatever, green maybe, but not much color. And it was this sweater with this big Christmas tree, and like, well, we would call it ugly sweater now. I thought that was the cutest sweater. And of course, the very next day, it doesn't matter, it's not Christmas season. We didn't have a concept of seasons.
Decked out.
I'm all decked out, ready to go. And I just thought I was like the prettiest. Or, you know, you would have a sweater that would say, grandma is the best, or whatever. Well, you didn't know what it said, so you just put it on and off you go to the English class. And
That's awesome.
it was unreal, the experience, or seeing kiwi. I mean, honestly, I was 18 years or 19 years old the very first time I saw a fruit, kiwi.
Wow.
Because it was an Iron Curtain, so things that didn't grow in USSR, you just didn't see.
Right.
Right, so
or bananas, right?
Yeah, I didn't even think they were tasting that good. I just thought it's kind of a starchy,
Mushy, weird.
And even kiwi, we didn't know, was it some type of potato? Do you peel it? How do you eat it? It was just, looking back, it wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah.
Chocolate, or just my youngest sister was born when the borders opened a little, and I remember this people from Britain visiting us, and they brought this whole bag of little dresses and onesies and stuff. In Ukraine or in USSR days, kids were wrapped up tight, like we put them to bed here, you know.
Swaddled.
Swaddled. Yeah. You were swaddled the whole time. Like there was no freedom. I don't know
up to
why.
1, right?
Up to the age of 1. Like,
can you imagine?
Yeah.
Oh,
So it was just weird if you think about it. Like even since you were little, you were swaddled and put into restrictions. But anyway, so I remember us dressing up my youngest sister, and we just thought it was incredible. These little tiny dresses, and I remember ladies like in a neighborhood freaking out. What are you doing? You were gonna break her back, or her leg is like just hanging there. And it was just so funny. We just thought it was so cool, and we were so happy just changing her and putting all these dresses on all the time. We just thought she was like a live doll.
Yeah, it would be such a change
it was huge.
Suddenly things that were not available outside of your Iron Curtain are just brought in, and it's bizarre.
Oh, right? It was. And and the other thing was seeing a gum. I remember this American guy who became a friend with our family, and we wrote, and he even flew to my and Chad's wedding. We just kept friendship throughout the whole how many years. And he had a gum. We did not have gums during USSR, so to see this, and it was really bright green, and I just was fascinated. And
you could just keep chewing this.
It's gross, but I'll tell you though what we did. We would stick the gum at the end of the day to the bed frame, And then we would,
No.
yeah, we did that.
No.
And we were so cool. We would go to school and we would have a gum. You had to hide it because you were not allowed to chew gum. It was a foreign thing, right?
Right.
Foreign influence. But just looking back, it was just crazy.
Yeah.
Like we literally had really not much. When you know what somebody else has,
Right.
you suddenly realize, man, we probably were poor.
Right. And at the time it didn't clue in.
No.
Yeah. What a blessing, though, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
you're in your teens at this point where you see gum and kiwi and bananas.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. So did that propel you to want to help Ukraine? Or what made you want to, for example, come work at Hungry for Life? Or did you always feel that it was just part of who you were to give back to your country? Or, yeah, walk us through that a bit. Did I word that funny?
No, you did word it. I'm just thinking how to word my part. I think what Dad planted and Mom planted in our minds and in our hearts to use every opportunity. Dad taught us to use every opportunity, and that you have, if you can live better, use every opportunity to do so. But that was also with an intention that you live better, but then you have more to give. And it literally is kind of a part of your DNA. It's really a part of DNA of all of my siblings. When we see opportunity to, live better, we use it, but we also use that opportunity to help people. So when I came to Canada and start working and start getting paychecks, thinking, what? Like, I can make this much money. And I just started seeing, like, man, the opportunity, how much more I can help my people. I don't know why, but God really put a passion in my heart for Ukrainians specifically. I just love Ukrainian people. And when I saw that opportunity, I wanted to do anything that I could to help people. And I saw, working at HFL as that huge opportunity, because I used to pray and not pray so much, but tell God sometimes and share with Chad, like, man, if I had $1 million, do you know how much stuff I could do? And God wouldn't give me. So then I said, okay, you're not giving me that. So I want to do something else then. Yeah. And I saw an opportunity to involve other people that could give, or we all could give a little, and then it turns into a lot. And that's how I ended up working for HFL, because I saw it as an opportunity.
And I would say you're doing quite well, because our Ukrainian projects get a lot of money.
You know what? God is good.
God is good.
Yeah. God is doing... God, there is nothing that stops God.
No.
And it's really not so much of what we do. It's our willingness to do what God calls us to, and he just does everything else.
And what a cool testimony for your family. I know your dad is with Jesus, but him and Jesus are probably looking and saying how proud of his family he is, of you and your siblings, and how you're all working together still to this day to do good for people, for Christ.
The credit goes to God, really.
100%.
100% God is credited for all of it. It's a privilege. It is, I see it like such a huge privilege. And I wish and I hope that all of us who have things here in the Western world, that we would recognize what a privilege and a blessing it is to have what we have. It is a privilege, and what a privilege and a blessing it is to be able to give. It's just, I said it to Chad once, I get high from being able to give, because it's almost like, it just makes you...
From being able to give, right, yes.
From being able to help somebody, or to assist somebody else that can give. It is such a privilege. It is such a privilege, because when you're on the other side of the spectrum, where you have to wait for somebody to bring you food, when you have to wait for somebody to come and feed you and change you because you are 75 or 85, or you are a handicap, or you are an orphan that is abused and have nobody to love, or there is nobody who offers you food, and you are like 3 or 4 years of age. What a privilege it is to be on this end of a story and be the one who can come and love that babushka and change her and give her something and give her hope, and be the somebody who can assist with that child being placed into a foster home, or him going to school, or him getting a hug. Or it is such an honor, it's such a privilege. It's nothing special that we do. It's so humbling that God would choose us to be those people.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because it's very easy to look at giving as an obligation and as our 10%, and that's it, and no more. But you're right, it is a privilege to give.
Yeah.
And we should be constantly asking God where he wants us in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
That's
a privilege.
A good one to sit in and think about, for sure. I want to start wrapping it up a little bit here. The projects that are in Ukraine today, what's Hungry for Life doing? How are we helping there?
In 2018, we actually had an opportunity to host a leadership conference in Ukraine. And we had a lot of people attend. And Dave Blundell was teaching servant leadership. It was quite 5-day, full on conference, and a lot of Dave did an unbelievable job, and the team doing all that teaching. And out of that conference, there were so many people came out that started ministries, small little ministries, because they felt equipped by what Dave was teaching. They got a knowledge of how to do things with what you have, and it's so encouraging, because since 2018 we had a lot of ministries birth in the eastern part of Ukraine. So we just had one partner, but now we actually have 5 partners in Ukraine, and some projects that are led by different people, but under John and Nadia's partnership.
And John and Nadia are?
John and Nadia are our partners, the longest standing partners in the Ukraine, and
our
she
field
happens
partners.
to be my sister.
Yes.
My oldest sister and her husband. So we're so blessed to work with them and to see the ministry grow now. And we have people that started after school programs. We have people that are foster families, 5 foster families. We have a lady that started taking elderly into her home. Ukraine doesn't have really old folks' homes, so we have this one lady who attended a conference who is now running this small old folks' home from her own home. It's just amazing to see the ministry grow and expand and have more partners.
And what groups here are working with those?
There is a lot of different people that give towards Ukraine from Fraser Valley here. But there is a group, Fraser Valley group, that is hands-on involved, and they've been traveling to Ukraine in the last, I want to say, probably 14 years. Fraser Valley Group has been visiting Ukraine, has a very special relationships already with the people there and the partners and just churches, and it's...
we want to give them a huge shout out right now, because
Yes.
they have done a lot.
These
are not our projects, they're other groups' projects that we facilitate for them. So Fraser Valley Group has done a really amazing job at being a catalyst for this. So
even during this unprecedented COVID times, they did 2 huge fundraisers that that just turned out amazing and raised a lot of money again. So we were able to sustain all our projects in the Ukraine during this crisis. Plus, even more, we were able to do a COVID relief, food relief, reliefs there as well.
Nice.
And even as far as a war zone. And it's been just amazing to have to partner with people here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you for shedding some light on that. We're running out of time, so I want to wrap it up. But thanks again for sitting down and for the second time sharing your story and shedding some light on the situation in Ukraine and the need there. Mm-hmm. And I said this in the last episode too, but I want to bring it back to compassion. And we all come from different walks of life, and it's easy to see everything from our point of view, which is very small. Yeah. So if you want to know more, check out our website, which is hungryforlife.org. And at the top, there's international partnerships. It's a drop-down menu. You can find your way over to Ukraine and find out more about what Mary's talking about and all of the projects that we're facilitating there. I heard God throughout this whole story of yours, and I just want to give him glory and credit for everything that he brought you guys through and brought your dad to and through, and thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that was great.
Privilege. Thank you.
Oh yes, and stay tuned for Mary's pierogi giveaway. That will be on the social media post. You'll figure out, or we'll post how you can win those, and you want to. And that's a wrap for that one.
Thanks for listening to What in the World, where we seek to educate and inspire. Here at Hungry for Life, we are passionate about your group having a global impact and eradicating needless suffering. For more information, head over to our website at hungryforlife.org. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and wherever you may listen to podcasts. Tune in every other week for another conversation about what is happening at Hungry for Life.